Part 3 of The Death and Life of Great American Cities discusses the forces of decline for city streets and neighborhoods. If you've watched other videos in this series on the death and life of great American cities, you'll know that Jane Jacobs argues for 4 reasons that makes a really good city: economic and social diversity, good mixtures of primary uses, a mingling of different ages in their buildings, and a high concentration of people. If you're interested in this topic, I put a link to buy this book in the video description. It's a really easy read, really good book that you can read a chapter or 2 a day of. In this video, I will discuss the forces of decline of a city, street, or neighborhood as discussed by Jane Jacobs in part 3 of her book. The first is really the result of the city actually being successful. A diverse mixture of uses in a certain area of a city can become so successful that a really intense competition arises to locate in that hip and happening neighborhood or street. The winners of this competition will only represent a narrow number of the mixture of uses that occupied that street or neighborhood, which made it so successful. As a result, only the most profitable uses will be able to stay or locate to that district of the city. These uses will be repeated and repeated on that street or neighborhood, making it extremely monotonous. Less profitable uses will also be crowded out. What usually happens is 1 or 2 of the most dominant uses will be triumphant. Jacobs describes this phenomenon as the economic equivalent of a fad. A most intricate and successful organism of economic mutual support and social mutual support has been destroyed by this process. Wow. We might be seeing this today in residential housing, where rents have gone up so high in certain neighborhoods that the predominant use becomes additional rental housing. Certain neighborhoods that come to mind are Brooklyn in New York City, the South End in Boston, certainly neighborhoods throughout any city that you're familiar with. I'm sure this is probably happening, where the cooler, the hipper areas of the city that probably were known for their mixture of uses and their older housing stock, which made it affordable to live there, has now become inundated with large managed buildings, primarily for apartments. The most profitable land use have trumped in those areas, so the success of those neighborhoods actually led to their downfall. Some cities, you can't even tell what neighborhood you're in because all the buildings look the same. People are no longer spread throughout the neighborhood at different times throughout the day because there's really only one primary use: residential housing. So what Jacobs is really saying is that the threat to the long-term success of a street or neighborhood is actually its current success. Another example of how a disproportionate amount of one single use in one particular area will lead to a city or street or neighborhood's decline is the night spot district. Jacobs argues these districts concentrate too many people in too irresponsible of a mood at the same time that cities can't naturally handle at once. These areas then become a ghost town during daylight hours. Jacobs also talks about the consequences of concentrating too narrow of a housing type in one particular area as well. Usually this results in childless people who can and will pay as much money as possible for the least amount of space as possible. This crowds out families, it crowds out a variety of different types of scenes, and as a result, it crowds out the businesses and economics that used to support the diverse different types of people that lived in these neighborhoods. Jacobs is writing this book in 1963, and she cites Greenwich Village as a neighborhood where this is actually happening. But it really reads like a modern day New York Times article of what's happening in cities throughout the country. It's an interesting cycle because new and innovative businesses or uses generally locate in the second tier areas of a city because it's the places of a city where they can afford the rents. Once this neighborhood becomes more hip and popular, other uses try to locate in this area, driving up the prices of rents in this now cool district. The diverse and original types of uses in a neighborhood are then crowded out, and the entire reason why that neighborhood might have been a good spot to live or hang out in becomes eroded. The neighborhood essentially is a new first-rate area of the city that everybody wants to locate in. So really, it's the same process of how a street becomes successful and how a street then declines. So how does Jacobs think that a street can avoid this or come back from this problem? Jacobs argues that cities should divert these uses to areas of the city where the uses won't be duplicative but actually add value to the street and add diversity to the street. She argues diversions can be done in 3 ways: zoning, the staunchness of public buildings, and competitive diversion. With zoning, cities can zone areas for diverse uses and diverse forms. When a city is zoning for diversity, they can utilize dimensional zoning to ensure a variety in the height of buildings in an area, or diversity in the sense of allowing a mixture of uses. Jacobs argues that utilizing zoning as a tool to create diversity on a street or a mixture of uses shouldn't be done to freeze the existing conditions on the street. That isn't the entire point. It's to allow the street to evolve and continuously add new and diverse uses. Second, the staunchness of public buildings can be utilized to locate city buildings such as libraries or city hall or other public functional buildings in places that would add diversity. Jacobs cites New York's public library as the perfect example of this. It's located on an immensely valuable piece of land, but if it were to be built like a skyscraper like its neighboring buildings, it wouldn't provide the same value it does as a library, because it's diverse and unique and fills a purpose in that neighborhood. Third is competitive diversion. Jacobs argues that the demand to live in these diverse, really active and great neighborhoods in a city is much higher than the supply. So her answer to this is to increase the supply of good neighborhoods and streets with a diverse mixture of uses. If you enjoy these videos on urban planning, please subscribe and comment a video idea that you would like done next.